I'm 25 years old, and my life has always felt like a balance between responsibility and quiet longing. At home, things are simple. My mother and I share a small but comfortable life together. She's the kind of woman who notices everything, whether it's the way I've tied my hair differently, or if I'm carrying a little extra worry on my face after a long day. She never lets anything slip past her. Yet, as close as we are, there are some things I keep only to myself, things even she wouldn't understand. One constant in my life has been my mother's closest friend, a woman who lives just down the street from us. She's always been auntie to me, though she isn't related by blood. Auntie has been part of our lives for as long as I can remember. She's single, living alone in her house. Whenever she visits us, there's this warmth about her that makes the room feel different. She carries herself with confidence, yet there's a softness in the way she speaks, especially when she talks to me. As a child, I used to enjoy her visits because she'd bring me little gifts, books, hair clips, sometimes sweets she had baked herself. As I grew older, her affection didn't fade. If anything, it deepened. She'd stroke my hair gently while asking me about my studies, telling me how grown up I looked, or how my smile lit up the room. I always thought of it as polite kindness, the kind of thing adults say to encourage younger people. But sometimes, her eyes would linger a moment longer than necessary, and her touch would feel like it carried unspoken words. Even now, when she comes over, she never forgets to make me feel noticed. A simple compliment, "This color looks beautiful on you," or "You've become so elegant," would leave me both flattered and confused. I'd smile, say thank you, and brush it off. I never let my mind wander too far. She was my mother's friend, after all. And yet, there was something unexplainable in the way she always made me feel special, as though her attention was different from the casual warmth others offered. One afternoon, my mother handed me a small packet and asked me to drop it off at Annie's house. She wasn't feeling well yesterday, she explained. Take this to her and check if she needs anything. I nodded, happy to help. The sun was soft that day, slipping lazily through the clouds as I walked to her house. It wasn't far, just a few turns down our narrow street. The lane was quiet, the kind of quiet you only find in neighborhoods where everyone knows each other too well. When I reached her front door and rang the bell, there was a moment's pause before she opened it. She stood there in a simple cotton dress, her hair tied back loosely, looking both surprised and pleased to see me. "Oh, it's you," she said, her lips curling into a warm smile. "Come in, Beta." I handed her the packet. "Amy sent this for you. She said you weren't feeling well yesterday." Her expression softened as she took it from me. "Your mother, always so thoughtful. Thank her for me." Then she looked at me for a moment longer and added, "And thank you for bringing it. Why don't you come inside? Stay for a little while." I hesitated. I hadn't planned to stay, but something in her voice, gentle yet insistent, made it hard to say no. I nodded and stepped inside. Her house felt different from ours. Where our home was filled with the noise of daily life, her place carried a kind of stillness. Everything was neatly arranged, every cushion in its place, every shelf dusted. Yet the air felt lived in, cozy in its own way. I noticed small things: the faint smell of jasmine from an oil diffuser, the family photographs on the wall that seemed to stretch back through decades, and the warm light falling across the living room sofa where she motioned for me to sit. "Make yourself comfortable," she said, disappearing into the kitchen. I sat down, glancing around quietly. There was something calming about her space, as though it reflected her own personality. Orderly, but with hidden corners of warmth. After a few minutes, she returned with a tray, carrying 2 glasses of juice and a plate of biscuits. "You didn't have to, Annie," I said, reaching for the glass she placed in front of me. "Of course I did," she replied, sitting across from me. When someone visits, even for a short while, they should feel at home. Especially you. The way she said, "especially you," made me pause for a heartbeat. I smiled, unsure how else to respond, and took a sip of juice. She leaned back, watching me quietly as I munched on a biscuit. "You've grown so much," she said after a while. "Sometimes I look at you and wonder where that little girl disappeared. You've become such a graceful young woman." I laughed lightly. You always say that. Because it's always true, she answered with a small smile. You remind me not remind me. You make me realize how precious it is to see someone grow, to see them turn into the person they're meant to be. Her words carried a weight I didn't fully understand, but they lingered in my chest like a soft echo. I set the glass down and looked at her, really looked at her. Her eyes were warm, but behind them was something I couldn't quite read. Loneliness, perhaps, or longing. It made me want to stay a little longer, though I couldn't explain why. I'll just sit for a bit, I told her, as though answering a question she hadn't asked aloud. Her smile widened, and she nodded. Good. I'm glad. We sat there, sipping juice, sharing small talk, yet underneath the ordinary words, I could sense something different unfolding, a quiet closeness that felt both familiar and strangely new. We sat in that gentle silence for a while, the kind that doesn't feel awkward but rather comforting. The clinking of glass as I set it down seemed louder than usual, filling the room between us. She noticed and smiled faintly before standing up. Juice is good, but tea makes the heart lighter, she said, almost to herself. Wait here, I'll make some. I nodded, watching her disappear into the kitchen again. From where I sat, I could hear the faint sounds of her moving about, water being poured, the whistle of the kettle, the soft clink of cups. The familiarity of it reminded me of my own mother, yet there was something different about the way Ani moved, slower, more deliberate. When she returned, the room filled with the rich scent of cardamom. She placed the tray between us, the steam rising from the cups curling in the air like delicate threads. She poured the tea with a steadiness that almost felt ceremonial. Careful, it's hot, she murmured, sliding the cup toward me. Our fingers brushed for a moment as I reached for it. The contact was brief, but strangely it sent a ripple through me, one I couldn't quite explain. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup, trying to focus on the tea instead of the way her touch lingered in my thoughts. We talked about ordinary things at first, her garden, how she'd recently planted jasmine again, my work, my mother's health. But the more we spoke, the more I began noticing small things I hadn't paid attention to before. The way her eyes seemed to linger on my face a moment longer than they needed to. The way her smile softened every time I looked directly at her. The way her hand occasionally rested on the table, close enough that I could almost feel its warmth even without touching it. At one point, when I leaned forward to place my cup back on the tray, her hand brushed against mine again, almost accidentally. Or maybe not. I froze for the briefest second, wondering if she had noticed, but she simply smiled gently as though nothing unusual had happened. Inside, though, my thoughts were racing. Am I imagining this? Or is there something more in the way she looks at me? I told myself I was being foolish. She was my mother's friend, older, wiser, someone who had always cared for me like family. And yet, there was something in her presence that was stirring a different kind of awareness in me. Something I hadn't let myself consider before. You're quiet, she said softly, pulling me out of my thoughts. I blinked and forced a smile. Just thinking. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion but in curiosity. About what? I hesitated. I couldn't possibly tell her what was going through my mind. Instead, I shrugged lightly. About life, I guess. About how quickly things change. She leaned back, her gaze shifting toward the window where the sunlight was beginning to fade into evening. Yes. Life does change quickly. Sometimes too quickly. Her tone carried a weight I hadn't expected. After a pause, she continued, her voice lower now, almost confessional. You know, I've lived alone for many years. People often ask me why I never married, why I chose this path. They don't understand that sometimes it isn't about choosing, it's about finding what truly makes your heart at peace. And for me, she trailed off, her eyes distant, thoughtful. For me, peace has always been elusive. Her honesty surprised me. She had always seemed strong, composed, unshaken. Seeing this vulnerable side of her made me feel closer to her in a way I hadn't before. Doesn't it get lonely? I asked quietly. She looked back at me, her eyes soft but searching. It does. more than I admit to most people. But I've learned to live with it. Still, there are moments when the loneliness feels heavier than usual. And in those times, I realize how deeply we all need someone. Not just company, but someone who sees us. Her words tugged at something inside me. I found myself staring at her, the gentle lines on her face, the quiet strength in her voice, the sadness hidden behind her smile. I had never thought of her this way before, not just as my mother's friend, not just as an auntie, but as a woman with her own quiet struggles, her own unspoken desires. I didn't know what to say. I simply nodded, though my heart felt strangely tight. For a long moment, we just sat there, sipping our tea, the silence filled with unspoken thoughts. Every time her eyes met mine, I felt an unfamiliar flutter in my chest, as if the air between us carried something more than words. I told myself I was reading too much into it. Maybe I was projecting, maybe I was confusing affection with something else. And yet, every glance, every touch, every pause in her voice seemed to suggest otherwise. When she reached out absent-mindedly to adjust the edge of my dupatta, her fingers brushed lightly against my shoulder. It was such a small, ordinary gesture, but my breath caught in my throat. Her touch lingered for just a second too long before she pulled her hand back, almost as if she realized what she had done. I lowered my gaze quickly, pretending to be focused on my cup, but inside I was a storm of questions. Why does it feel like this? Why does it feel like she's saying something without words? The air between us felt heavier now, filled with emotions neither of us had named. I wanted to speak, to ask, to understand what this was, but the words stayed trapped in my throat. Instead, I finished my tea slowly, hoping it would steady me. She watched me with a quiet intensity that made me feel both nervous and strangely safe. By the time I set the empty cup down, I knew one thing for certain. Something had shifted between us. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was wrong, but the warmth of her hand, the softness in her eyes, the way her voice carried that hidden ache, all of it was pulling me into a space I had never been before. And though I tried to convince myself it was nothing, a part of me already knew it was everything. The evening light had softened into golden streaks that slipped in through the window, bathing the room in a warm glow. I shifted slightly on the sofa, my fingers tracing the rim of my teacup absent-mindedly, while she leaned back, watching me. I could feel her gaze even when I didn't meet it. It was steady, calm, but layered with something I couldn't name. After a while, she moved closer. The distance between us shrank until the edge of her dress brushed against my arm. I stiffened slightly, uncertain, but she only smiled gently, as though to ease my nerves. "You've always been special to me," she said softly, her voice almost like a whisper. I turned to her, unsure how to respond. "Special? How?" Her eyes softened, and she reached for my hand. At first, I thought it was just a casual gesture, but she didn't let go. Her fingers wrapped around mine with a tenderness that made my heart pound. I wanted to pull back, yet I didn't. Instead, I let her warmth seep into me, confusing and comforting all at once. "From the first time I saw you," she continued, her thumb brushing lightly against the back of my hand, "I felt something different. You were just a girl then, but even as you grew up, I never stopped caring for you. I know I've always shown you affection, and maybe you thought it was just formal, but it wasn't." Her honesty made my breath hitch. My heart raced, and my mind scattered between disbelief and recognition. "Auntie," I started, my voice trembling. She shook her head lightly, silencing me. "I don't want you to feel pressured. I need you to know that what I feel for you is real. It's not something I can hide anymore." Her hand tightened around mine, not with force, but with a need that was both fragile and profound. I looked at her, really looked, and the vulnerability in her eyes struck me. She wasn't the composed, strong woman I had always seen. She was baring herself, opening a door I hadn't even realized existed. My chest tightened. A swirl of emotions crashed through me: guilt, confusion, nervousness, but also something else, something that scared me even more: the undeniable sense of safety in her presence. Before I could find words, She raised her free hand and brushed a strand of hair from my face. Her fingers lingered against my cheek, warm and careful, as if she was afraid I might break. The touch sent shivers down my spine, and I closed my eyes briefly, fighting the chaos inside me. When I opened them again, she was closer still. So close I could see the flecks of brown in her eyes, the lines that softened when she smiled, the quiet ache she carried. She leaned forward slightly, pressing her forehead gently against mine. "I don't want you to be afraid," she whispered. "All I want is for you to know that you're cherished." The sincerity in her voice was disarming. I couldn't hold back anymore. A part of me that had been resisting, questioning, finally loosened. Without thinking, I leaned into her, resting my head against her shoulder. Her arms wrapped around me instantly, pulling me into an embrace that felt both forbidden and inevitable. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I just listened to the steady rhythm of her heartbeat beneath my ear, felt the rise and fall of her chest as she breathed. Her hand stroked my hair slowly, rhythmically, in the way she had done so many times before, but this time it felt different, charged with a tenderness that carried unspoken truths. "I don't know what to do," I whispered, my voice muffled against her. "This feels wrong, but at the same time." Her embrace tightened slightly, and she kissed the top of my head, soft and lingering. "It doesn't have to feel wrong. What matters is what's here." She placed her hand gently over my heart, "Not what the world says." Tears stung my eyes, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe it was relief, maybe fear, maybe the sheer intensity of the moment. I pulled back slightly to look at her, and she cupped my face in her hands, her thumbs brushing the corners of my eyes where the tears threatened to fall. "You're so strong," she said quietly. "But you don't always have to be. Not with me." Her words broke something open inside me. I didn't want to cry, yet the emotion in her voice, the kindness in her touch, made it impossible to hold back. A tear slipped free, and she leaned in, kissing it away before I could wipe it myself. The intimacy of it startled me, yet I didn't pull back. I couldn't. Instead, I let myself sink into the moment, into the warmth of her presence, into the way she was holding me as though I was the most precious thing in the world. "I'm scared," I admitted softly. Her forehead pressed against mine again, and she closed her eyes.
"So am I."
But sometimes, the things that scare us the most are the things worth holding on to. I swallowed hard, caught between hesitation and surrender. My hands, almost unconsciously, clutched at her arms, seeking stability in the storm of feelings she had stirred. She smiled faintly, her breath warm against my skin, and pressed a soft kiss to my forehead. It was tender, almost reverent, and it sent a wave of calm through me. That small kiss, that simple act, felt like the breaking of a dam. All the doubts, all the confusion, didn't disappear, but they shifted. Instead of resisting, I found myself opening up, letting the vulnerability settle between us. "I don't know if I can give you what you want," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Her hand stroked my hair again, gentle and patient. "I don't want anything you're not ready to give. I only want to be here with you, to care for you, the way I always have." That's enough for me. Her selflessness, her willingness to wait, undid me. I buried my face into her shoulder again, inhaling the familiar scent of her, and allowed myself to stay there, wrapped in the safety of her arms. Time seemed to lose meaning. The world outside her house could have collapsed, and I wouldn't have noticed. All that mattered was the warmth of her embrace, the softness of her voice, the way my heart finally stopped fighting and allowed itself to feel. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a promise. It was simply the beginning, the first spark of something fragile, tender, and real. The days that followed were strangely quiet at home, yet inside me, everything had changed. I couldn't stop replaying that evening in my head, the way she had held me, the tenderness of her kiss on my forehead, the vulnerability in her voice. It had unsettled me, but it had also awakened something I couldn't ignore. At first, I tried to keep my distance. I told myself it was better not to complicate things. She was my mother's friend. a woman who had always been part of my life in ways I hadn't questioned until now. But the more I tried to resist, the stronger the pull became. Every time I passed by her house, I felt a tug in my chest, like an invisible thread tying me to her. It wasn't long before I found myself knocking on her door again. She opened it with a smile that looked almost like relief, as though she had been waiting. "You came," she said softly, stepping aside to let me in. I nodded, unable to say much. But the warmth in her eyes told me she understood everything I couldn't put into words. That visit turned into another, and then another. Soon it became routine. I would find excuses, returning a borrowed dish, delivering something for my mother, or sometimes no excuse at all. She never questioned it. She welcomed me each time with the same quiet joy, as though my presence alone was enough to brighten her world. We would sit together in her living room, sharing tea and long talks about everything and nothing. She told me stories from her youth, about the choices she had made, about the life she lived alone. I told her about my dreams, my doubts, the things I couldn't tell anyone else. Somewhere between the laughter and the silences, I realized that what we had was becoming something much deeper. Our hugs began to linger longer. At first, they were casual, like the embraces we had always shared. But gradually, they became something more. I would feel her arms tighten around me just a little longer than before, her breath brushing against my hair, my own body melting into hers without resistance. It felt both dangerous and safe at the same time. One evening, as we sat side by side on the sofa, she reached for my hand. Her fingers intertwined with mine naturally, as if they had always belonged there. I looked at her, startled, but she didn't let go. Instead, she held my gaze with an intensity that made my heart pound. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice steady but soft. I swallowed hard. "What is it?" She took a breath, her thumb brushing over the back of my hand. I know, I've fallen for you." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and impossible to ignore. My chest tightened, and I pulled my hand back slightly, though not completely. "Ani, you can't mean that." Her eyes didn't waver. "I do. I've tried to fight it, I've tried to keep it hidden, but I can't anymore. Being with you, even in these small moments, it makes me feel alive in a way I haven't in years." I shook my head, torn between panic and longing.
This isn't right.
What will people say? What about my mother? "She trusts you." Her expression softened, but she reached out, cupping my face in her hand. "I know. And I don't want to hurt anyone. That's why this has to remain our secret. No one should know, not unless you want them to." But I couldn't keep pretending I don't feel this. Tears pricked at my eyes, though I wasn't sure why. Fear? Guilt? Or the overwhelming weight of hearing aloud what I had secretly started to feel myself? I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I wanted to run. But when her thumb brushed away the tear before it could fall, my heart betrayed me. I leaned into her touch. "I don't know what to do," I whispered. Her hand slid down to hold mine again, firm yet gentle. "You don't have to do anything. Just let yourself feel. If it's too much, if it ever makes you uncomfortable, I'll step back. But if you feel even a fraction of what I feel, then maybe we can share something beautiful, even if it stays only between us." I opened my eyes to find her watching me, her gaze filled with both fear and hope. My breath caught in my throat. Slowly, hesitantly, I nodded. I think I do feel something. I'm just scared to admit it." Her smile was soft, trembling at the edges as though she, too, was on the verge of tears. She leaned closer, her lips brushing against my cheek in the lightest of kisses. It was fleeting, barely there, but it set my heart racing. I closed my eyes, savoring the warmth it left behind. When I opened them, she was still close, her forehead resting against mine. "Thank you," she whispered, "for trusting me with this." The moment felt fragile, like glass that could shatter with a single wrong move. And yet it also felt like the beginning of something I could no longer deny. I let myself hold her hand more firmly, grounding myself in the simplicity of that touch. From that day on, our bond deepened in quiet, secret ways. We laughed more freely, shared more intimately, and held each other longer, as though each embrace was a promise we dared not speak aloud. But beneath the tenderness, there was always the tension of secrecy, the unspoken understanding that no one must ever find out. Each time I left her house, I carried both warmth and fear in my chest. Warmth from the closeness we shared, fear from the weight of the secret I now carried. At night, I would lie awake, replaying her words, her touch, her kiss on my cheek, wondering if I had crossed a line I could never return from. And yet, the next day, I would find myself walking to her door again, unable to stay away. Because for all the confusion and guilt, there was one undeniable truth. In her presence, I felt seen, cared for, and cherished in a way I never had before. It was a secret bond, fragile but precious, and I was no longer willing to let it go. After her confession, something inside me shifted. For days, I kept replaying those words, "I've fallen for you," over and over, like a secret melody only my heart could hear. At first, I had tried to convince myself that it was too risky, too complicated. But no matter how hard I tried to push it aside, I couldn't deny the warmth I felt when I was with her. One evening, I gathered enough courage to tell her. We were sitting in her living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting golden shadows on the walls. She poured tea for both of us, her hand steady, but I could sense her quiet anticipation. She had been waiting for me to say something. I set my cup down and took a breath. I've been thinking about what you said." She froze for a moment, then carefully set her own cup down. And her voice was gentle, but I could hear the nervousness beneath it. "I think I feel the same way," I admitted, my words trembling. "I've tried to fight it, but every time I'm with you, I feel safe, cared for. It's different from anything I've ever felt before." Her eyes softened. Filling with tears, she quickly blinked away. She reached across the table and took my hand, squeezing it as though anchoring herself. "Do you know what that means to me? To hear you say this." I smiled faintly, though my heart was pounding. "Maybe it means we're not alone in this anymore." She let out a shaky laugh and brought my hand to her lips, pressing the gentlest kiss against my knuckles. The touch sent a shiver through me, so tender, so deliberate, it was as though she was sealing a promise. From that moment, our closeness blossomed into something even deeper. She began to care for me in ways no one else ever had. When I was stressed from work or troubled by family, she was the one who checked on me, who sat with me in silence until my racing thoughts calmed. She had a way of noticing the little things, how my shoulders tensed, how my eyes looked tired, how I sometimes bit my lip when I was worried. And each time, she would comfort me with a word, a touch, a look that reminded me I wasn't alone. One night, I came to her house exhausted after a long, difficult day. I didn't even have the energy to talk. She didn't ask questions. Instead, she guided me to the sofa, sat beside me, and let me rest my head on her shoulder. Her hand stroked my hair slowly, rhythmically, and before I knew it, my eyes began to close. "You can sleep," she whispered. "I'll stay right here." I drifted off, surrounded by her warmth, feeling safer than I had in years. When I woke later, the world outside was quiet, and she was still there, her hand resting lightly on mine as if she hadn't moved the whole time. In moments like that, we built our own private world, a world of two, hidden from everyone else. It didn't matter that we had to keep it secret, that no one could know. What mattered was the sanctuary we found in each other. Our conversations grew deeper too, shaped by a new honesty. "Do you ever regret not marrying?" I asked her once, as we sipped tea on her balcony. She thought for a moment before shaking her head. "Not anymore. For a long time, I thought something was missing in my life. But now, I think maybe I was waiting for you." Her words made my chest tighten. I reached for her hand and held it, not caring if my fingers trembled. "And I think I was waiting for someone like you, someone who sees me the way you do." She smiled, her thumb brushing circles over my skin. "Then maybe we were meant to find each other." Another time, when I was restless with doubts, I asked, Do you think what we're doing is wrong? She grew quiet, then looked at me with steady eyes. Love is never wrong, my dear. The world might not understand, but what we share, it's ours. And as long as it's honest and gentle, I don't think it can be wrong. Her words sank into me, soothing the storm of guilt and confusion. For the first time, I began to accept that what we had was real, and that it mattered more than what others might think. Our tender moments became small rituals of love. Sometimes, she would kiss my hand without saying a word, as though to remind me of her devotion. Sometimes, I would brush my fingers over her cheek, tracing the lines of her face that carried years of quiet strength. And sometimes, when silence settled between us, I would simply lean against her, resting my head on her shoulder, breathing in her presence. It wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was about the quiet, steady way we chose each other again and again, in every small moment. One evening, as she brushed my hair with slow, gentle strokes, I closed my eyes and murmured, "Do you know what you've done to me?" Her fingers paused. "What have I done?" she asked softly. "You've made me believe in love again," I whispered. I felt her hand tremble slightly before it steadied again. She bent down and pressed her lips to the crown of my head. "Then that's all I'll ever want, to keep reminding you." And just like that, I knew that whatever this was, fragile, secret, forbidden, it was also the most real thing I had ever experienced. It happened sooner than I thought. One evening, I returned home after spending hours with her. I thought I had been careful, slipping out at odd times, coming back with excuses. But mothers have a way of seeing through the smallest cracks in their children's stories. As I entered the house, my mother was waiting. Her eyes followed me, steady and knowing. "You've been going to her house a lot lately," she said, her tone calm but edged with curiosity. My heart skipped a beat. I opened my mouth, trying to find the right words, but nothing came out. Panic swelled inside me. What if she found out? What if everything fell apart now? "Is there something you want to tell me?" she pressed gently. I lowered my gaze, my hands trembling. "No, I just go to help her sometimes. She's alone, after all." But my voice betrayed me. It wavered, fragile as glass. My mother stepped closer, studying me in silence. The weight of her eyes made me feel exposed, as though she could see straight through my excuses into the truth I was too afraid to speak. Finally, she sighed, her voice softer this time. "I've known her for many years. I've seen the way she looks at you, the way she cares for you." My head snapped up in shock. You knew?" She nodded slowly. "Of course I knew. But some things can't be taught or forced. You had to feel it for yourself." Tears pricked at my eyes. I had braced myself for anger, for rejection, for the sharp sting of disapproval. Instead, my mother's words were like a door opening where I thought there would only be walls. "I just want you to be happy," she continued, her hand brushing against my cheek. "If she gives you love, if she makes you feel cared for, then who am I to stand in the way?" I couldn't hold back anymore. The tears slipped free, warm trails down my face. I whispered, "I thought you'd never understand." She pulled me into her arms, holding me the way she had when I was a child. "I may not understand everything," she admitted, "but I understand what it means to love someone. And I see that in you." That night, I went back to her house, not out of fear or secrecy, but out of a need to hold her and tell her everything. When I saw her, I rushed into her arms, burying my face in her shoulder. "She knows," I whispered through my tears. "My mother knows." She stiffened for a moment, then pulled back to search my face. And she isn't angry," I said, my voice breaking into a shaky laugh. "She said she just wants me to be happy." Relief washed over her features, and for the first time, I saw her eyes glisten with tears too. She cupped my face, her hands warm and steady. "Then maybe we don't have to be afraid anymore." I leaned into her touch, overwhelmed by the simplicity of it all. For so long, I had lived with tension, with secrecy, with the fear of being discovered. And yet here we were, accepted, understood, and finally free to love without hiding. I kissed her cheek softly, then her lips, tasting the salt of our mingled tears. "I love you," I whispered, the words finally free from the cage of my chest. She smiled through her tears, pulling me close. "And I love you." In that moment, I realized something profound. Love doesn't always come in the shape you expect, nor from the place you imagine. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in the form of gentle hands, soft care, and an embrace you never want to let go of. And when it does, it changes your life forever. Looking back now, I realize that love doesn't always arrive dressed in grand gestures or loud declarations. Sometimes, it comes softly, like the brush of her hand against mine, or the way she whispered comfort into my silences. What we shared was never part of any plan, never something I imagined for myself. It was secret, fragile, and in many ways forbidden. Yet within that secrecy, I found a kind of belonging I had been searching for all my life. She gave me care when I didn't know I needed it, and love when I thought I couldn't deserve it. Yes, we live in shadows, careful of the world outside.
But not all secrets are heavy.
Some secrets protect what is delicate, allowing it to grow quietly, away from judgment. Our love is one of those. Hidden but real, quiet but strong. And as I sit with her now, my hand in hers, I know our story is far from over. The world may never fully understand, but in the safety of her arms, I've found everything I was missing. Sometimes, the greatest love is the one that finds you where you least expect it and stays.